everybody, and welcome to the PT on Ice Daily Show. My name is Christina Previtt. I am the lead faculty for clinical management of the fitness athlete pregnancy and postpartum. It's an 8-week online course where we talk about how to help barbell athletes, strength athletes get back onto a barbell and what to do during their pregnancy in regards to staying active. I teach that course with Kelsey Valentine. She's an internal pelvic floor physiotherapist. She's assistant lead faculty with me, and it's a super fun course. Our next cohort is starting May 18th. So if you guys are interested in jumping into that course, I encourage you guys to do so. All right, so I am flipping from my Jerry hat, putting on my pregnancy postpartum hat. And again, the biggest thing that you guys have been asking about in regards to content from the faculty is around COVID-19 and what we know in different cohorts of individuals. And so we put up a social media post on Instagram. Kelsey and I have been working on this together, trying to figure out everything that we can figure out around pregnancy and the postpartum period and how COVID-19 is going to affect pregnancy. What I'm going to put a disclaimer in right now is that we are just trying to figure this out. It is changing day by day, hour by hour. The literature I'm going to discuss today has all been published in the last week. So, and from March 25th, 26th was the first paper that had been published in the New England Journal of Medicine. Since then, we have some information that's coming out of the response that China has had over the last several months. So we're seeing some retrospective case studies and chart reviews that have been done to see what some of the outcomes have been. But again, we are still in the weeds of this and we are not 100% sure. Because of that, a lot of our recommendations that we're seeing coming from our regulatory bodies, including the CDC and the World Health Organization, are relatively conservative in nature. As I was thinking about COVID-19 and pregnancy, there were a couple of different pillars that I think are going to be important for us as clinicians to have information about so that we can help with our clients who we are seeing who have a lot of stress and anxiety about what could happen if they were to contract COVID-19 and what some of the risk is. So the way that I've kind of broken this down is one, what happens if you get COVID-19 during your pregnancy, in any point along your pregnancy, what happens to mom, what happens to baby, what is your risk relative to the general population of contracting COVID-19 when you're pregnant versus when you are not. What happens if you actively have COVID-19 and you go into labor? What is some of the risk? What is some of the risk of transmission of COVID-19 to a newborn or infant in regards to things like breastfeeding? What is some of the risk there? And then what is the risk in general to kids? I think those are probably the 5 big ones that we are going to be talking about in this podcast. So the first one is about risk of developing COVID-19 versus the general population. Right now, based on the information that is available to us, there does not appear to be a heightened risk of developing COVID-19 if you are pregnant. Right now, though, individuals who are pregnant are still considered to be a vulnerable group. The reason for that is because we know that with some of the physiology that is going on in the woman's body during pregnancy, that they are slightly immunosuppressed because of the amount of resources that are being shunted to the developing fetus and having that be a priority in a woman's physiology. So there is a slight immunosuppression. I was speaking about the acute care guidelines on the Jerry on Ice segment on Wednesday, and those guidelines recommend that if you are pregnant, that you try to avoid going into a positive COVID-19 situation if you're in healthcare. And I think, again, that recommendation is made based on the fact that we cannot be 100% positive that risk is exactly the same. We don't have enough cases We don't have the time to do a full research study. There's a lot of research dollars that are being put into COVID-19 right now, but just as it stands, we don't know about relative risk. Right now we think it's relatively the same, but we don't know. So in terms of best practices, trying to be as careful and cautious as possible. If you are pregnant, make sure that you're adhering to physical distancing rules, and just trying to keep your body as healthy as possible is going to be extremely important. All right, number 2, what happens if you develop COVID-19 during your pregnancy? If you develop COVID-19 in your second, third trimester, there is no evidence right now that there is transmission of the virus through the placenta to the baby. So what that means is that you will be treated for COVID-19, but we do not think, as of right now, that there is a transmission from mother to child in utero. That is based on a study that was published out of Wuhan, China. So it's been how, again, this is where the information is largely coming from. You're going to see me checking in on my on my computer, because I'm going through all the studies as we go. So they said that the clinical characteristics of COVID-19 in pregnant women were similar to those reported for non-pregnant adults. So no severity, and then there was no vertical transmission, intrauterine infection to children in utero in regards to transmission. So what that means is, if you are pregnant, not if you are delivering, if you are pregnant and you have COVID-19, that right now what we think is that there is no transmission to the child. Okay, next is what happens if you develop COVID-19 around when you are set to deliver, or you're experiencing symptoms of COVID-19. In the New England Journal of Medicine, what they just did a case study of a woman in the US who was positive for COVID-19 and went into labor. This case study showed that the support personnel had precautions in place with complete PPE. She was able to have a spontaneous vaginal delivery. They did not do delayed cord clamping. They did not do initial skin-to-skin contact, and they whisked the baby to the NICU, put her, or him, I'm not sure actually the sex of the baby, put the baby into a warm incubation pool up in the, or not pool, a tray in the NICU, let the mom recover. By day 6, mom was recovered, and both baby and mom were able to be discharged. There was no evidence of infection through genital fluids, which is the worry with a spontaneous vaginal delivery if a woman is positive for COVID-19 and the neonate was healthy and everybody was able to be discharged home. That story, again, is a very positive one, showing that, especially if precautions are in place, that there may not be a transmission from mom to baby, especially if mom is positive around time of delivery. There are some things that, to me, that was really sad, was around the fact that she had to be isolated from her child in those very early days, which can be really heart-wrenching for a new mom or a mom again. And so definitely something to be talking about with your clients, because that really is something that could impact mental health. It could really, not to mention that they're sick with COVID-19, but that is a really tough emotional situation to happen. Obviously, the mom is going to be advocating for the health of the child, but definitely something to be considering. However, there has been reported evidence of early onset infection of neonates with COVID-19 in Wuhan, China. So there were 19 neonates that were confirmed positive in China through their through their pandemic that had transmission at various times postpartum. So this was posted in JAMA Pediatrics, and of the 33, so they had 33 neonates that were born with mothers who had COVID-19 at time of delivery, 3 of them ended up with symptomatic COVID-19. They were mild, except in one case. In one case, when the child was a preemie, they were born at 31 weeks gestation. They ended up requiring resuscitation, and EPGAR scores were really low, 3, 4, and 5 at 1, 5, and 10 minutes. They had to do quite a bit of treatment, including ventilation, antibiotics, and caffeine. But the baby did recover post COVID-19 infection. And I think that was, so the other 2 were born at 39 and 40 weeks of gestation, had a relatively mild case of COVID-19. The preemie, who didn't have the same respiratory development, did have symptoms that were relatively severe, requiring ventilation. Baby did recover. All of these 3 births in those neonates, the ones with severe COVID-19, they were all born via C-section. We don't really know, again, in terms of what is the best clinical practice guideline. Are we thinking that women who are positive for COVID-19 are going to be put into a C-section scenario right away? We don't know. Again, the US case showed no transmission through vaginal delivery. Some of the cases of neonates being infected with COVID-19 that were happening in Wuhan were via C-section. So we don't really know, and we don't know how many vaginal deliveries that were negative, how many C-sections that were negative. Again, we still don't have that information. Risk, I believe, is relatively low in terms of transmission during labor and delivery, but it's not 0. And we're learning more and more. That is going to be a huge source of stress for moms. But we're going to try and do the best that we can, obviously, to try and calm some of the stresses down for some of our pregnant clients. If we're seeing them via telehealth, we can talk through what we know. We do think that the rate of transmission during delivery from mom to baby is relatively low. But again, it has happened. Okay, so that is number 3. Number 4 is around breastfeeding. If a mom is positive for COVID-19, does it transfer through the breast milk? Again, initial research, when they looked at women who could express breast milk and who were positive for COVID-19, when they tested for viral markers in the breast milk, they did not see any transmission. One last thing about the delivery, there were some babies who were expressing antibodies for COVID-19 from moms who had positive diagnosis. So it also might be possible that immunity is coming from mom to baby if they have COVID-19 during their pregnancy, which I think is going to be another interesting area of research that's going to be coming up in the next, obviously, several months as we get more and more information about the impact of COVID-19 in this population. Back to the breastfeeding. So expressed breast milk was not showing positive markers of COVID-19 for women who are positive for the virus. So right now, the recommendation is that women can continue to breastfeed, either pumped express breast milk or on the breast. The biggest concern is droplet precautions. So if a mom was breastfeeding and she coughed and she has positive COVID-19, it is extremely possible, especially given the proximity of the baby to your body, that droplets could reach the baby's eyes, nose, or mouth. And so that is probably the biggest concern. So I'm pretty sure that most people would probably advocate to pump. Not that the breast milk itself is bad. It's just if you don't want transmission through droplets based on proximity. And so something to really consider if that is the case for the mom that you are working with. Again, you're going to be in conversation with their entire healthcare team, but that is, again, what we know. Number 5 is around transmission to kids. So what we know is that in terms of who is contracting COVID-19, our rates of contraction for kids younger than 10 appears to be lower than other populations, so lower than adults, and then obviously much lower than older adults. In China, kids younger than 10 represented about 1% of their total cases. In Korea, kids underneath 19 were only 4.8% of positive cases, and to date, that's about 5% in the US. Symptoms in kids appear to be very similar to that of adults, basically experiencing fever, dry cough, fatigue, and difficulty breathing. Some kids may also experience abdominal pain and diarrhea. And so just know that the cardinal symptoms of COVID-19 appear to be the same in kids as they do in adults, but they may be experiencing additional symptoms. So it's important to note that the way that kids present with COVID-19 might be slightly different. There are not a ton of cases of COVID-19 in very young infants, so under a year old. They don't seem to be as prone to the development of COVID-19. However, when they do contract COVID-19, they are more likely to have a severe manifestation of the condition. So 10.6% of infants less than a year old presented with severe or critical illness, compared with 7.3% of kids between 1 to 5, 4.2% of children between 6 and 10, 4% of children between 11 and 15, and 3% in adolescents 16 and older. So as much as rate of transmission is significantly lower in children, but for infants, rate of severe disease is higher than in other cohorts. So it's almost similar to some of our older adult populations, where kids who do contract it, 10% of them are going to require more severe intervention, potentially including ventilation. And therefore, it's just really important for us to be taking care to make sure that we are adhering to our physical distancing, especially if you do have a young one at home, because they are a vulnerable population. So to sum this all up, the risk of transmitting COVID-19 or contracting COVID-19 in pregnancy, right now, we do not have any evidence to suggest that risk is higher. However, pregnant women are still considered a vulnerable group, secondary to the fact that we know there's an immunosuppressive effect of pregnancy on the woman's body. If you develop COVID-19 during your pregnancy, there is no evidence to suggest that there is a vertical transmission into the baby via the placenta. Therefore, that we're not at risk, we're not concerned. They're going to be monitoring the baby, but right now, we do not think that if you have COVID-19 that it's going to affect your child, though there is some preliminary evidence that antibodies showing some immunity to COVID-19 may be present. If you go into labor and you have COVID-19, risk of transmission to your neonate is low. It is not impossible. So making sure that your healthcare team is obviously going by the appropriate protocols, and they are going to be monitoring your baby very closely. That is something that is outside of your control and something that we don't really want to there's nothing that is in our control about that, as long as we're taking the proper precautions. Breastfeeding, there doesn't appear to be transmission of COVID-19 into breast milk, but if you are positive for COVID-19, you want to be careful that you are not coughing or sneezing while your little one is breastfeeding, because that is probably the bigger risk of droplet transmission when a baby is latched. And then in terms of transmission, risk of transmission of COVID-19 to children under 19 appears to be lower than the general population. But in neonates, the percentage of cases that are marked as severe appears to be higher. And then as a child's respiratory system continues to develop, risk of severe reaction to COVID-19 appears to go down. I hope you guys found that helpful. Again, all of these research studies that I found have been published in the last 5 or 6 days. A lot of them are obviously not rigorous prospective chart review or retrospective chart reviews or prospective studies. We just don't have the time. But I am happy to see that the research community is trying really hard to get this information out to public health and frontline staff so that they can use it to guide their decision-making process when it comes to working with this vulnerable population. I know that stress is really high for a lot of our clients that are pregnant, and what that means, there's a lot of women who are now thinking about doing a home birth. There are situations in different hospitals where they are no longer allowed to have a support person with them. A lot of people have been fighting that and trying to allow at least one person to be with the mother during labor and delivery. Again, this is a really evolving situation. There's a lot of moving parts here. If you guys have any questions, comments, please let us know. We'll keep you guys up to date as more research is released in regards to what we know about COVID and pregnancy and COVID's impact on young children. And yeah, I hope you guys found that helpful. Again, comment below if you guys have anything that you guys have experienced or any personal experience with this. I think that gives a little bit of depth to this conversation. Otherwise, I hope you guys have a wonderful Friday. We're kind of with that COVID theme. I'm going to be on here in 2 weeks' time talking about some breathing technique work. But other than that, enjoy your Friday and stay safe. Bye, everyone.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to the PT on Ice Daily Show. If you enjoyed this content, head on over to iTunes and leave us a review. And be sure to check us out on Facebook and Instagram at the Institute of Clinical Excellence. If you're interested in getting plugged into more ICE content on a weekly basis while earning CEUs from home, check out our virtual ICE online mentorship program at ptonice.com. While you're there, sign up for our Hump Day Hustling newsletter for a free email every Wednesday morning with our top 5 research articles and social media posts that we think are worth reading. Head over to ptonice.com and scroll to the bottom of the page to sign up.